Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. So today we are starting a new series. This will be a monthly series in which, round about the every third Saturday of every month, we shall have a lecture on a different topic, on a contemporary topic, and this will hopefully continue, inshallah, for the next some months. Today, as you would be knowing, we would be discussing a topic that is dear to our hearts simply because this is something which all of us mostly go through, and that is marriage, of course. So, marriage or the institution of marriage, the way we find it today, as is being practiced in Muslim societies, it leaves much to be desired. And I think one of the most important areas that needs to be explored further, discussed further, and evaluated is this institution of marriage and how it can really create harmony between the spouses. So you see, the Quran at one place tells us that one of the basic reasons for this institution is the spouses can seek peace and comfort from each other. So the words used by the Quran are litaskunu ilayha. So the word taskunu, as you can see from its very sound, it actually emanates from the word sakun, which is comfort, which is peace and harmony. So this is what the Quran tells us, that as men and women standing apart as two genders, each of them have a role to play, and each of them have a vacuum which is found in their own personalities. And this institution of marriage is actually recommended and has been formed by the Almighty to fulfill this vacuum, to bring them together in the form of an everlasting bond in which they are able to promote each other's strengths and qualities, in which they are able to have the best out of each other, encourage one another, and as a family, they are able to form the basic building block of a society. So a society in which the family institution is strong is a society which is bound to be strong itself, and vice versa. In the most important area of the family, and in the eyes of the Almighty, as we can see from several verses of the Quran, is that the newborn or the next born has to be provided this comfort, this affection from both the mother and the father. So unless the mother and the father, they gel together, they are able to understand one another, and instead of living in idealism, they are more practically oriented, and they know that marriage is something in which you have to accommodate one another, and as a result, promote one another's qualities, bring them to light, encourage them, and create that atmosphere which makes a house a home. Create that atmosphere in which each one of us knows that when a new child is born, when a new life is given birth, then the whole process of life continuing in that family is something to be very, very dear to the family as well as to the parents. So today we'll talk about some of the important components of marriage. And as I said, I mean, we should not be too ambitious as to talk about a perfect marriage or an ideal marriage. I think more important is that we do understand the fact that as far as marriage itself is concerned, we should be perhaps more careful and more concerned about what a successful marriage is. So instead of a perfect marriage, let us talk about successful marriage and some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes that the spouses generally make, and which we need to overcome. And as I said, the essential part of this is that the institution of family has been created by the Almighty for the welfare and the well-being of the child or the children who are to be born in this family. And they need the affection of the mother and the father. They need this harmony between the parents. And so therefore, before even bringing these children into this world, this is of paramount importance that spouses have to realize that this has to be a successful marriage. And when I say a successful marriage, of course, I'm going to explain that more in the next few minutes. So let me start off by explaining to you that they are, I can say this with reasonable amount of certainty, that this sakoon or this comfort or this harmony which the Quran speaks of between the spouses, I think this is something which we will be able to gauge through some of the important mutual understanding and mutual traits that we need to practice as spouses. So, the first thing, the first most important component of the institution of the family is what I can call as forbearance. So, forbearance actually means that the spouses are in a position to accommodate the diversity, the difference of background that each one of them possesses. So, you see, the husband and the wife, they come from different backgrounds, and generally, and even if they come from the same backgrounds, even then we know that once you are exposed to one another 24/7, a different personality dawns upon us. We have a different experience of a person before marriage, but the same person, as soon as marriage takes place, he transforms into a new person. Why? Because this time you know that person through his or her habits. And those habits are generally not exposed before marriage, because before marriage, whatever relationship you might be having, if it's a Muslim relationship, it is in certain bounds. And because of those certain bounds, we are not able to gauge the full personality that a person might be having. So, this difference between personalities has to be accommodated. It has to be adjusted. The husband has to realize that he is bringing the bride home, and he has to be more adjustable, because the bride who is coming to his house is coming from a different background in most cases, and she will be having a different setup, a different mindset. He'll have a different set of habits, and there will be so many things in which the two, in spite of having some common views, might have different personalities. So the first and foremost cornerstone of a successful marriage, of a marriage in which you have to realize that is going to prove as a boon for the newborn, is this forbearance. So, forbearance or tolerance, that you have to understand that you are not going to bring each other in a position or in a spot of bother by insisting that your own point of view or your own worldview has to be adopted by the opposite member. So, each personality should be free to behave in the manner it would like to behave. The personality should be allowed to express that freedom. And as you can see, this freedom is something which is dear to each one of us. So the second important cornerstone of a successful marriage, and as I said, when the Quran says that a successful marriage, it actually refers to the fact that both the spouses are able to draw peace and comfort from one another. So the second important element or second important component of a successful marriage, in my humble view, is again something that we can term as friendship. So yes, this might be strange that people might think that it's always difficult to make friends with one's spouse. Well, I think this is an overstatement, and it's an understatement also in certain respects. But yes, friendship can be developed with the spouse. And I think the pinnacle of friendship with your spouse is perhaps if you are soulmates to one another. And when I talk about soulmates, of course, the element of having so many things in common, so many things in which you are able to connect to the other person is important. But then this is not all about friendship. So friendship actually is the name of an attitude. It's not the name of having the same viewpoints, or the number of things that you might share with your spouse have to be the same. No. On the contrary, friendship is an attitude. And that attitude, I think, does not need to be explained at all, because all of us know what friendship is all about. It's like providing that shoulder to your spouse. It's like encouraging your spouse. It's like downplaying the faults of your spouse. It's like encouraging and highlighting the qualities of your spouse. It's not about point scoring. It's all about adjustment. It's all about going out of the way. And this is very important. If you want to develop friendship with someone, I mean, this could be anyone, but in particular, if that friendship is to be developed between your spouses or between the two spouses, then yes, going out of the way. And as you say that, I mean, going that extra mile for your spouse, doing something special for your spouse, this always creates that inner feeling of comfort, of harmony, of being wanted, of being cared, that you can clearly see that will bring your spouse closer to you. And as friends have one another, they don't need the shoulder of other people. They don't need to lean on other people. They just need to lean on one another. So the second important element of a good marriage or a successful marriage is friendship. And when I talk about friendship, another important thing is that you have to have that element of small talk with each other. I'm not talking about loose talk, small talk. And small talk obviously means that you are able to do gupshup with your spouse. You have those things in you and yourself, which is, I mean, which you behave at times like a boyish sort of a boisterousness, and you have the girlish attitude in which you behave with one another as if you are children, and you do that little bit of teasing and a little bit of light-hearted comments. So these things actually add to that friendship. And you should not be, but taunting one another, because taunt is something which is absolutely against the norms of friendship. But yes, some light humor, some light comments. So these are things that make that small talk very interesting. So small talk instead of loose talk is something which cements that friendship relationship. So yes, the second element of a successful marriage is what we can call as being friends to one another. The third important component of a successful marriage, incidentally, begins with an F as well, and that is forgiveness. Yes, forgiveness, because you see, when you're living together as spouses, mistakes are bound to happen. Problems are bound to arise. At times, mistakes are done advertently. At times, they're done inadvertently. But you see, what you need to do is that as far as you can, as best as you can, you should try to forgive your spouse. You should try to just play down the mistakes that the spouse might be committing. So there are certain things that you might not be able to do so. For example, there could be certain bad habits that you need to avoid. But then that is something which is a separate effort. But other than that, things that might be overlooked or can be overlooked should be overlooked. Of course, things that cannot be overlooked, that's a different category. And I'm not referring to that category. I'm referring to the category in which faults, mistakes, blemishes, they can be overlooked. They can be ignored. And we can move on in life in spite of those faults and blemishes. So yes, the third important element of a successful marriage is forgiveness. The fourth important element of a successful marriage, incidentally, also begins with an F, and that is fidelity or faithfulness. I mean, both refer to the same thing. So fidelity and faithfulness means that you have feelings reserved for your spouse. You will not look outside the marriage bond. You will only look towards your own spouse. And you know what? More often than not, it happens then when you see a deficiency in your spouse or some shortcoming, you look outside and look up to someone who might not be having that particular shortcoming. But you see, what we fail to realize is that maybe that person might not be having the shortcoming that we find in our own spouse, but then there would be some other shortcomings that that person would have. And why? Because you see, all of us are imperfect individuals. We're not perfect individuals. And hence, these shortcomings are going to exist. So marital faithfulness, marital fidelity, being faithful to your wife, and the wife being faithful to the husband actually means that you have to devote yourself, your emotions in all respects to your wife, to your husband, and to your life partner in all respects. So generally, people think that fidelity and faithfulness is something which accounts for the ultimate extramarital relationship in which you indulge in intimacy with the opposite gender. Well, that's the extreme case. Other than that, much before that actually happens, there is this relationship building, this out of marriage relationship building, which might take place, and it starts off by that unrestrained sight or that unrestrained gaze towards the opposite gender. You look at the opposite gender, and then you would like to have more friendship with the opposite gender outside your marriage, and of course continue if it is possible. And this plays havoc with your own marriage. So to be faithful and to be devoted, as I said, is of paramount importance, because as I said, if you don't like some of the habits of or some shortcomings exist in your spouse, then do remember that whoever you are looking up to outside your marriage bond, he or she might not be having the same mistakes or shortcomings as your own spouse, but there could be several other which might not be in your notice. So this is something which goes on, and we have to realize that marriage is is something in which imperfect individuals have to come together to hide one another's imperfections. A successful marriage, or let me say a perfect marriage, if I use the word, would be in which two imperfect individuals come together and hide their imperfections. So this is the way forward, that we have to realize that as far as our marriage bond is concerned, it relies very highly on that faithful attitude, on being absolutely sincere to our spouse, and not look beyond that marriage bond, and anything which relates to that idealism that we might be expecting to happen, that has to be dealt with a practical approach, that practical wisdom, in which you are not going to find any perfect spouse in this world, and hence the need for the hereafter. So that hereafter, when it comes, you can look for all sorts of spouses which are perfect, but not in this world, because in this world there are compromises, there are shortcomings, and this happens with every individual. So this was the fourth component of a successful marriage. So the fifth and last component, again, it begins with an F, is what I can term as feedback. Yes, feedback. So you see, giving periodic feedback to your spouse, it helps a lot. It does help a lot. You need to tell your spouse at times that how, instead of telling your spouse, I think I can say this also and go a step beyond by saying it, that actually, instead of saying something to your spouse, you should ask that your spouse to give you some feedback on your own attitude, on your own behavior. Because you see, what happens is that when we lead our lives, we, on many occasions, because we follow a certain routine, we are not able to gauge some of the mistakes that we might be making. They might be going unnoticed. So your spouse is in a very good position to let you know what those mistakes and shortcomings are that you're not realizing. Yes, there could be an element of exaggeration, but then that can be made up, because if the spouse points you in the right direction, then out of your own imagination, you can then evaluate yourself that yes, you are falling well short in that area, or maybe you're not falling well short, your spouse is not understanding you, and so therefore a discussion would take place in which that communication, which perhaps was not taking place, would then be something that you would be able to connect with one another. So I think this is very important, that feedback element, in which at times you see you might not even need to elicit any feedback. You just need to sit back, shut your eyes, and imagine what your spouse might be thinking of you. And I think a little honest evaluation in your own mind would perhaps lead you to what exactly the opinion of your spouse would be. But as I said, it's absolutely no harm. In fact, it promotes trust. It promotes mutual understanding if you really ask for that feedback. Because as I said, it's like a mirror that you can see, in which you can see your own self. Your spouse is like a mirror to you. And finally, I think besides these 5 Fs, I would also refer to one important thing, which generally we also at times do not adopt, and that is being truthful to one another. So truthfulness between the spouses. You have to be truthful. And this thing is going to build that trust between the spouses. If you are truthful to one another, you will be creating that trust. You will not be, you would never like to check the cell phone of your spouse in any way, because when you know that your spouse is speaking the truth to you, so any shortcoming, any blemish, any error that he or she might be making, you would be in a position to say, yes, well, my spouse is going to tell me the truth. So being truthful to your spouse is something which builds that trust. So truthfulness and trust, they go hand in hand with one another, and they account for that blissful, successful married life that I'm just referring to. Now, before I go on, I would like to also point out 2 important areas in which husbands and wives make mistakes, and these are common mistakes made by both husbands and wives. So let me start off by 2 common mistakes which husbands make in their marital lives, and this is something that they have to understand at the very outset. And the first of them is that they have to understand that they are responsible. They are responsible for running the family. When I say responsible, I actually refer to the fact that they are financially responsible, economically responsible to check and to bring prosperity to their homes, to be generous to their spouses in all the ways that are possible, and especially in the case of money that they're going to provide. So, in according to the Islamic setup of a family, which is proposed by the Quran, the husband is given the responsibility to earn for the family. The wife, of course, she can earn, but then the money belongs to her. She, out of her own sweet will, might like to share this money with her husband if she wants to. But if she wants to keep it to herself, then husbands have to realize that this is something that doesn't belong to them. On the other hand, it is essential that husbands have to share, have to give a generous portion of their income and whatever they earn to the wife, because this is the commitment which a husband makes when he brings a bride home, that he is responsible, he is financially responsible. And you know what? The meher that you give, the dowry that you give, or the dower, I would say, the dower that you give at the time of meher, the husband, which they give that, this is basically a token. It's a symbolic token for the fact that you are financially responsible for your wife. So people generally don't understand why meher is given. Meher actually is this token of commitment by the husband, that today I'm giving this money to you to make my commitment to you that I am going to be financially responsible to you. And as a token of that responsibility, here is some money which I would like to give to you as a pledge. And remember, this meher money has to be, I mean, in the fitness of things, to be paid at the time of marriage. People generally don't give this meher money, and they just wait and wait and wait. And God forbid, when the divorce takes place, if it is to take place, it is only then that this meher money is brought into discussion. So this is not the right way. So the philosophy of meher is that you have to give it at the time of the wedding, so that you are able to convey this to your spouse, that yes, you are financially responsible for her. And when you do this, you have to also realize that this financial responsibility just does not entail the household expenses that she might be managing if she is managing the house. I'm going to explain that in my next point. But for example, if she is given the responsibility of running the house, then your financial responsibility is not just to provide the expenses to manage and run a house. It is equally important that you give a sizable amount of pocket money to her. So pocket money is something which is part of that financial arrangement. And that pocket money has to be a generous amount given every month in a way that should not be in installments, as is generally the case, that people, I mean, in the first place, husbands don't even realize that pocket money or money for the personal expense of the bride or the wife is something that they're liable to, they're responsible for. And they think that this household expense is all that they should give, and out of that particular expense, she should save money for her own expense. So this is not the right approach. You have to give separate money for her own maintenance, for her own lifestyle and living, and separate money for the management of the house. And this should be according to your own income. I mean, it would be despicable and horrible that if you're earning in millions and you're giving a couple of thousand as pocket money to your wife. So that is absolutely what we call stinginess, and this is something which accounts for a lot of marriage botherations and altercations. I'm sure you'll be knowing about that. So being generous to your wife in providing for her, and if she's earning, that doesn't mean that your responsibility for earning for her ends. No, that is something that you have to do. As I said earlier on, yes, if she out of her own sweet will tells you that, well, I don't need your money and I have my own, or I need just your money in part, yes, this is something that she can say. But she can always insist that you should provide her with the money that she needs, while she saves her own money that she earns from her profession for her own future, or to give it to anyone that she would like. The second misconception in this regard is that people think that Islam advocates a setup in which the wife has to care for the kitchen, for ironing, for cleaning, for washing clothes, etc. So all these household errands, people think they have been given to the wife as a responsibility by the Quran. And it might be shocking for many of you, but let me tell you that nowhere in the Quran is this responsibility given to the wife in any way. So this setup is negotiable. I mean, the husband can do the household chores. Of course, he can hire a help, The wife can do the household chores, they can do them together. But this notion that wife is responsible for the household chores Islamically is not correct. I mean, if you think that Islam tells us that the wife has to manage the house, then there is nowhere in the Quran thus, I mean, where you can find this mention. All that the Quran says is that the husband is, I mean, he has to earn for the family. What the setup is going to be after that, that is something that you should be, that you should mutually decide. And in fact, it is in the fitness of things that this should be decided before marriage, so that there is no problem which takes place after that. So husbands need to realize that this is something that they need to discuss with their spouses. Now, what happens is that in our Eastern societies, but particularly Muslim societies, because women are already working in the kitchen at times, or they're not very professional, or they don't have a profession, so it is understood that, well, their duty is to be at home and do the household chores while the husband earns. As I said, this is something of a negotiable nature. You have to understand that if this is happening culturally, then it is only happening culturally. There's nothing Islamic about it. As far as Islam is concerned, it has left the administration, the nature of this administration, I would say, to the spouses. So with mutual understanding, they can reach any setup. I mean, they could, as I said, the wife could opt for managing the house, or husbands could opt for managing the house. And today, because of this online phenomena getting so common because of COVID, at times both husband and wife are working from home, so they can share the responsibility, or they can divide the responsibility, or they can delegate to anyone of themselves. Whatever setup they would like to end up with is something which depends on their own mutual agreement. There's nothing in this regard which Islam has stipulated, and if people think so, then they are grossly mistaken. So these are two grave misconceptions, that women are liable for household chores. No, they are not. And second, that they have to be, I mean, if they are given enough money to run the house, and that also takes care of their own personal pocket money, that also is incorrect. So the household chore, I mean, money for the management of the house is something that has to be given to her separately. And as far as her own pocket money is concerned, it should be generously given to her at the start of every month, preferably before the start of that month, so that she can have her own planning to do vis-a-vis the expenses that she has. Also, I would suggest here that a periodic increase with inflation, with this price hike that we witness, or we're witnessing in the last so many months, is in order. That if you're maintaining your wife's expenditure, then of course, depending on your own income, you must also raise that pocket money periodically, keeping in view the inflationary adjustments. So these two misconceptions relate to husbands' worldview, or generally what people think regarding family envisaged by religion. The second thing that I'd like to point out here is, of course, some of the misconceptions which a wife might have in this regard, or some of the wrong attitudes which she might have in this regard. So the first of them that I would like to bring into discussion is, which actually the Quran has pointed out, and that is, it says that as wives, because husbands are absolutely exposed to wives in all respects, so wives must not expose their husbands in the society. So the Quranic words are فَالصَّالِحَاتٌ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. They are حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ, which means that they guard their secrets. So women or wives, they guard the secrets of their husbands. Of course, it's vice versa as well. But in particular, if a wife chooses to expose her husband or the bad traits of her husband in the society, she can really, and I mean, totally go to extremes in this matter, and the husband would be exposed. The family will end up in a situation in which there could be damage that cannot be repaired. So even today, I think you might agree with me that I see young girls getting married and discussing their husbands' shortcomings, even very, very intimate things in the society, amongst their friends, even with their mothers, which is not absolutely correct. So the Quran tells us that you have to guard the secrets of your husbands, you have to guard the personal information of the husbands. Yes, as I said, this is like a reciprocal thing, but in particular, wives have been told by the Quran that this is something that they should exercise. And the second thing is that because husbands have been given the position of the head of the family, So therefore, Quran says, "Fasalihatu qanitatun," that righteous wives are those who show compliance to their husbands, which means that they adopt an attitude of harmony. And of course, this means that the house has to be run through mutual consultation, through discussion in a very democratic way. But then there could be instances in which there is a deadlock, in which there could be, I mean, there's no headway out of that situation. So the husband has been given the final authority or the final casting vote. In if there is a deadlock, if there is something that cannot be resolved, both have a strong opinion and could be equally valid. But then you have to move on in life. So the Quran tells us that because husbands are responsible for the maintenance of the family, and because they have been made as the heads of the family, so therefore, in case of any deadlock, they have, I mean, their opinion would prevail, and so therefore, wives have to accept this and accept it. Not that I mean, they don't have to accept that when they are accepting their husband's opinion, then his opinion is necessarily correct. No, it's a way to resolve a dispute that you just need to move ahead and move forward. And one of the opinions had to be accepted. The Quran chose the husband's opinion because he is given the status of the head of the family. So these are some of the areas in which I wanted to point out some of the problems that are continuously occurring in our lives. As I said, some of them are financial, some of them are because of that lack of understanding that the spouses have for one another. They think that life of idealism is something in which the spouse, be it the husband or the wife, he or she has to comply and it has to, in all intents and purposes, be a person who is absolutely compatible. Well, that is not going to take place because compatibility is something which is absolutely accidental. It could be some compatibility, it could be partial, it could be none. And whether you are compatible at all or you're not, another thing is that habits could be totally different. So you have to adjust and accommodate. And adjustment and accommodation, this is what marriage is all about. So I will end my talk here. As I said, I pointed out some of the areas in which harmony and peace between the spouses. I talked about forbearance. I talked about forgiveness. Talked about friendship. Talked about fidelity and feedback. So these are and truthfulness. These are the areas which make a marriage strong. And then I spoke about some of the misconceptions, two grave misconceptions which husbands are plagued with, and two maybe attitudes that wives need to pay attention to. And so if these are taken care of, I do think that the marriage which is at trial, and the topic, of course, speaks of the fact that marriage on trial actually means that today the institution of marriage is something which is really suffering because of the fact that the spouses, either they end up in extremes or they don't understand the meaning of marriage, or they indulge in idealism, or they are too selfish at times. So we have to be practical. We have to understand that on the development, on the harmony, and on the well-being of the institution of marriage actually depends the harmony and the well-being of the next generation, which is going to be born in that family. So unless the husband and wife have that harmony, that cannot be transferred to the child which is going to be born. And if it is a unit in which there is this harmony and this peace and comfort, then rest assured, because a family is the basic building block. It is the basic building block of a society. If a society exists in which this institution of family has these traits, then we can be very, very satisfied that the society as a whole, in which one single unit is behaving properly, is going to be a society in which generally every next person born, every individual born, would be able to contribute as much as he or she can for the betterment of this world, and also be a person who is connected to God in the best possible way. So I'm just going to finish my talk here, and I'm available for any questions that you might be having.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for a great lecture on marriage. It was very insightful, especially you thinking about the areas that you said of why the areas of husbands and wives and how they're supposed to treat each other. I think that would be something that I hope we can all practice, inshallah. So our first question comes from Rafia Khwaja. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr.
Right.
Shehzad, I have one question and one or two points. I Sometimes the husband and wife come from very different backgrounds, and without really finding out about each other's backgrounds, they get married. I know
Mhm.
of a couple where the husband's family was extremely religious, the mother, and she was
Mhm.
constantly after the sons to say his prayers, say his prayers, say his prayers. When he got married, his wife was also reasonably religious. So 15 days after the marriage, she noticed he wasn't saying his prayers. So she said very calmly, "Why don't you say your prayers?" He went berserk. He took
Mhm.
all his clothes, threw them out of the window, and
Mhm.
started shouting and said, "Don't you ever dare to tell me to say my prayers." Now,
Mhm.
this conflict was from the way the mother had brought up the son. This is one story because I've personally seen this. Second point, I think I would like you to address is what happens when you are in a joint family system and the mother in law has expectations for you to be in the kitchen, be a daughter-in-law, but also you're supposed to be doing all the work, the cooking, the cleaning, and the son just goes to work and comes back and sees a nice clean home without realizing what his wife has gone through. And the last point I'd like to make is that when a couple both are working, I have seen husbands tell the wife, "You're earning. Why should I be giving you pocket money? You have money. You do what you want, but I'm not going to be giving you money for your clothes and your other needs." So these are the things which I have seen and experienced in life.
So I think I just answered these questions in my conversation as well. That this is a grave misconception in which people think that the duty of the wife is to be in the kitchen, to keep it spick and span, to prepare food for the husband. As I said, this is an absolutely cultural thing. And cultural thing has to be dealt with in the form of culture. You can request your wife to do something, and you can be in a position to make that request in any way. But we must not think that it is something which has been Islamically prescribed. Islam has not prescribed this at all. This is like something that you have to come to know through mutual understanding. And because the culture of the subcontinent is such, and in most rural societies, which are slightly now becoming urban, because women have been playing this role in the kitchen, that people think that the Quran is also telling them to be in the kitchen. Because you see, the Quran tells the husband to be the head of the family and provide for the family, the next step or the next conclusion is automatically made that, well, if he's going to provide, then the wife has to run the family. I mean, run the kitchen or manage all the expenses. This is something which the Quran has never said. All that it has said is that expenses have to be provided by him. Whatever the setup, it has to be through mutual understanding. But because this is never discussed before marriage, because this is not never brought up, because there is not even any awareness regarding this, that women can continue to suffer. So I think that this is like creating awareness to the fact that as far as religion is concerned, as far as the Quran is concerned, it does not in any way prescribe that women have to do these chores in any way. As I said, it is out of a personal adjustment that has to take place, that these have to take place. Secondly, I also clarified this point that as far as the personal earning of a wife is concerned, that is absolutely her own belonging. I mean, the husband cannot even look at towards the money that she is earning, and he does not have the right to say this, that because you're earning, so therefore I'm not going to give you any pocket money or any expense. Yes, the wife can forego that if she wants to out of her own sweet will, but the husband telling her wife or his wife that, well, because you're earning, so therefore I'm not going to give the money to you. This is something that I mean, if he's doing this, he's violating the very marriage contract that has been made when he was made the head of the family. So remember, the husband was made the head of the family due to two reasons. The Quran says, "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum 'ala ba'd wa bima anfaqu min amwalihim," which means that husbands have been made the head of the family because of two reasons. Bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum 'ala ba'd, which means that they are generally more suited towards this task. And the second is bima anfaqu min amwalihim, because they are liable to, they have been made liable to earn for the family. They have been made liable to financially cater for the family. So when he is actually not doing so, then he is actually violating the very marriage contract which came into existence when the two had come together in that bond of marriage. So, as I said, this is like creating this awareness that anything which is done beyond this or against this is not what is recommended by religion. It would amount to oppression, it would amount to injustice, it would amount to a wrong attitude. So I think all that we can do is we can point out these things, we can create awareness regarding these attitudes and these responsibilities, because this is the starting point. And because of the fact that people are not even aware of their own rights, wives are not aware of this. I mean, generally, wives accept their roles as women, as people who are going to run the house. They don't know that this is not a responsibility. This is something that they have been given a choice. If they want, yes, they can do it. And if they refuse, then of course this has to be a mutual choice. And another thing which is very important is that seldom are these things discussed before marriage. Every time a dispute takes place, every time something bad takes place, only then things are brought into discussion, and that too after marriage. So the third thing that has to change in our society is that discussing the post-marriage scenario or post-marriage setup before marriage between the spouses is very essential. Even with the families, is very essential, and this is equally essential. I mean, I would say more essential when you are living in a joint family system. This is very essential, because you see, when you're living in a joint family system, you're not just dealing with the spouses, you're not just dealing with your wife or with your husband, you're dealing with a number of other relationships like your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, etc. So they have to be also made aware that a woman is not liable for these responsibilities. So I think this is basically a pre-marriage discussion that has to take place, and this is something that we must propose and create awareness about before they enter into any formal bond. Otherwise, as I said, things keep happening, and then normally it's too late for any remedy, and we are left with those disputes and all kinds of bad mouthing that takes place, and ultimately, God forbid, it goes as far as to even break that marriage.
What about, Dr. Shehzad, the religious strict upbringing which some mothers give to their sons? Like I'm telling you that story where the son could not refuse anything his mother, but retaliated with his wife, who said nothing wrong to him except saying, I don't see you saying your prayers. So there has to be something going wrong somewhere.
Again, obviously, this was an absolutely wrong attitude by the mother to the way this was not the right way to raise her child in any way. I mean, if the son was not offering the prayer, it was not her responsibility to force him to offer the prayer. All that she could do, or she should have done, was to recommend why the prayer has to be offered, what is the reason for the prayer to be offered, and of course, periodically reminding the child when he's growing up that how important it is to us to connect to God, etc. But once the child has become an adult, this is no business of any person to be angry if he's not offering the prayer, or scold him or tell him off in any way. That is now his own personal relationship with the Almighty. He is now responsible for his own deeds before the Almighty. So, because of the fact that parenting itself is marred by a number of flaws, that you get cases like this that you have just referred to. So, as parents, also we have to realize that just as a lot of things need to be desired, they need to be rectified between the spouses. Similarly, I've been discussing this just in the morning in a session, that parenting itself is a skill that has to be acquired, it has to be exercised, because unless you are a good parent, you cannot be a good spouse.
So the marriage was ruined, but in the first 15 days, by the way, the husband retaliated on the wife for the just simple prayer question. It's sad, children. It's tragic.
Obviously, it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We've been talking about the compatibility of the spouses and how it's important for two people to be very compatible in order to lead a successful marriage. What would you say? How long should people take, and like what kind of questions should they ask before getting married to make that transition smooth?
Yeah. So you see, compatibility is a big, I mean, let me call it a farce. There's compatibility is before marriage is always something that you can never gauge in its depth, because when you talk about compatibility, you have your own concept of compatibility. If you're talking about compatibility with in the views that we might have, for example, the same view about politics or economics or society in general, then this is something which can keep changing, and in which every person has a right to develop and go ahead and forsake his previous opinion. And also at the same time, it does not account for a marriage in which you will find quarrels and things taking place. Marriage is more about the fact that this compatibility, however much it could be there between the spouses, even in regard to their views, it seldom is there with regard to their habits. So you see, in spite of having similar views, in spite of being compatible vis-a-vis your own opinions about certain issues, the thing is that as a person, you might be differing. You might be an absolutely different person. For example, you would like to sleep early, your spouse would like to sleep late. For example, you would like to do a certain task at a certain time, and this would not be the case of the spouse. You would like to eat at a certain time, and this would not be like something that your spouse would like. So you see, it is more of compatibility between habits, and that, as I said, is seldom. It seldom takes place. So I think what we need to understand is that however much you get exposed to people before marriage, marriage itself is a gamble. It is a gamble because of the fact that the person who's going to emerge after marriage is not the same person that you have seen before marriage, because you have just discussed some of the views and some of the compatible things that you might have. The habits and the some of the other things that develop once you become a husband and once you become a wife, you have the change in yourself is going to be known only after marriage. So I think what needs to be understood is that instead of looking for compatibility, I mean, yes, to a certain extent, that is fine. But beyond that, you need to look more towards adjustment, more towards the fact that every person has a life to live. He or she has the freedom to choose the life to live. You must not impose yourself on your spouse, and the spouse must not impose yourself on you, so that you are able to respect one's views, live different lives, have your own privacy, have your own personal freedom. So I think these are the more important things, that once marriage takes place, you have to realize that it's more of that adjustment. It is more of realizing the fact that different people of different backgrounds, when they come together, they cannot be the same. And hence, you have to live while respecting one another's habits. Yes, there could be certain grave things that you'd like to point out in your spouse, but then that should be a friendly discussion. But other than that, it is all a story of accommodation and adjustment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I might have a personal question with this if we have time towards the end, but getting to chat questions. A question asks, a girl has been forced into marriage contract and now husband is not leaving her nor accepting his right of khuda, which means leaving the marriage contract. But unfortunately, the husband has been also threatening her and asking her to not go to court or do anything else. What can be done in this case?
Well, it depends on the country that you're living in. So countries in which laws can protect individuals, I think law is the only way out. You have to proceed by taking legal help and legal protection, because you see, the husband is being now unreasonable. I mean, he's not complying with the wishes of the spouse, because you see, every spouse, whether it's the wife or the husband, has the right to dismember the marriage, to break the marriage. I mean, this is a right that each one of them has. So if one of them does not like to live, then he or she the other person should respect that. And if this is not taking place, and the husband is not even allowing the wife to go to the courts to obtain legal help, then this would mean again that he is actually going way beyond his jurisdiction and his control. So therefore, in countries where the legal system is strong, I think there is no way out but to do that. And in countries where the legal system is compromised, again, there too, I would say that maybe the interference of the elders of the family, maybe the interference of some of the family friends might help. And ultimately, if even that does not work, then be it as bad as it is, still you have to approach the court of law, because you see, you are legally married to someone, and that legal dissolution has to take place, and that can only take place through a court of law.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sun, for that clarification. The next question asks, it's also related to compatibility, and it asks, how should we interact with our future spouses to be and discuss all these matters or the problems, marriage problems with them? Because that gets into how much interaction is appropriate before, according to religion, before marriage.
I think the best way out is that you make a list of the things. There is a list that you can make. I mean, slowly think about the things that are expected after marriage. As I just said, one of the most important things is maintenance that has to be provided. People think that this is very ordinary, or people feel shame in discussing financial matters. I think this has to be overcome, because this is a very essential part of marriage, that expenses have to be met. Expenses play a vital role in the marriage. So discussing that what exactly would be the expenses the husband can afford and would be able to do so that the wife is absolutely clear what she's going to get. And secondly, her role, what exactly, how would her role be defined, her profession. Of course, she would be allowed to continue with her profession, which of course no husband should in any way stop his wife from doing so. And taking that assurance that yes, if he's going to earn, then her money will not be tampered with. And of course, there are a number of other things also which are specific to every situation. So I think the best way out would be to make a list of those things, and you can take some time, imagine, and there could be still things that you are not able to come to, but then if you start that process, your mind will automatically lead you to certain questions, and there could be even a clause which says that there could be some other discussions that that might not be brought up at this time, but later on in life, once you get married, they might be brought up, and we would settle these through mutual consultation, or we could appoint an arbitrator in this regard, so that there's no difference of opinion in a certain way. But then, as I said, the starting point is that list, is that checklist that every spouse should make, and he or she must not feel ashamed in any way. See, today people feel ashamed if they ask for guarantees, if they ask for things, then they automatically think that this is perhaps against the affection and love that the other person would be having for the spouse. This is not so, because you see, it's a very serious thing. You're entering into a lifelong relationship. It's a lifelong relationship if it is a healthy relationship. So for that, you need to seek certain assurances. You have to seek certain parameters that you must know how they are going to exercise. So I think this is what I would suggest. And we have to, I mean, overcome the shame, because this is what is stopping us from discussing such things.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question is related to, practically what's been going on in a lot of marriages, it seems. So the participant mentions that they've seen many women as patients who are undergoing domestic abuse and are financially dependent on the husband. So they're trapped, and we call it a virtue to be patient in this situation while the husband uses certain ayahs to validate and Islamicize the domestic abuse. Isn't marriage in our culture rather becoming a source of destruction of a person rather than a form of attaining peace?
So that is what I pointed out in my talk, that yes, it is becoming an oppressive institution. It is now becoming something that after maybe a couple of months, the wife starts feeling sick and tired of the husband, and it could be the same way for the husband as well, because he's at times not very sincere, and there could be other reasons as well. So that is precisely why I chose to pick up this topic as a topic of discussion, in which we need to understand that these are the things that account for a successful marriage. And husbands have to realize that because they are the heads of the family, they have to do more, because they are more responsible to create that atmosphere. And if a wife is just living with him because she has no place to go, or because they have children, then it is a matter of great shame that it is not out of her own will that she's living with him, but because of certain compelling circumstances that are leading her to do so. So it's against integrity, it's against one's decency, and any person who would just think that this is against decency or norms of decency should even shudder. I mean, should shut up at what the situation has become to, or has come to. So I think that if in a society where this awareness is not present, then women, especially wives, they are oppressed, and we are seeing this oppression in third world countries ever since a long time. And once upon a time, the joint family system was a big blessing, but over a period of time, as attitudes have developed, as urbanization has taken place, and as some of the other things have come to fore, it has now become a big curse. So joint family system has become, it still I mean, well practiced in certain places or certain parts of the globe, but in most cases, it is now becoming a big curse, and people are now trying to give up that family system because it actually arose from that brotherhood, the brotherly system, which is prevalent in most parts. The feudal societies, they are now breaking down, and families are now moving out, and marriages are now taking place between far off individuals. Not there are no more intermarriages in many areas. But you see, these are the things that need reformation of the society in general. And unless that takes place, we just cannot isolate an individual.
Dr. Saleem, the next question asks, how can a husband and wife be soulmates while they see the different personalities or aspects of their personalities that are different from each other? So even emotionally, these might be split. So in one case, your husband and wife can understand one part of yourself or one another, and you need a friend or person who can understand a different part of you. So suppose if a man is very jolly and his wife is not, if he tries to be jolly with another woman or his female friends, will that be considered as infidelity?
I think yes, this would be. I mean, this would be the start of infidelity, I would say, because you see, now you are looking outside the marriage bond, and something which was not being fulfilled by your spouse, you're now finding that being fulfilled by some other person. And I mean, I'm not saying that it starts. I mean, you're becoming unfaithful at that time, but you see, it's like a door which once opened, it is going to stay open, and you can enter that door and then go to other distances. So it's just not easy to curtail it to just that small portion. I mean, it's bound to get wider and wider, and then more things creep into it. So therefore, what you need to understand is that we are living in an imperfect world. There would be shortcomings in our spouses. The issue here is to adjust to those shortcomings. Why? Because your spouse is also adjusting to your shortcomings. So there's something wrong with you, I mean, with your spouse, because of which you're looking outside the marriage bond. She could be in the same position, that she could find a number of things wrong with you, and there are, because you see, all of us have our flaws and shortcomings. So she will start looking out, and then this is like a never-ending affair. So what we have to realize is that as human beings, because of these natural flaws and errors that human beings have, this is how it's going to be. And perfection can only be achieved in the hereafter. So if you have any perfection, or if you want any perfection, then wait for that, or earn that perfection once you reach the hereafter. This life is not for that perfection. This life is to be in a position to sacrifice, to be in a position to win the heart of the other person, to be in a position to go that extra mile. So this life is the life of a person in which you have to exert as far as you can by sacrificing, and as I said, by going out of the way to for the other person. Then the reward is something that's going to take place in the next world. So whatever you're thinking regarding a very best partner or an ideal partnership or everything that is going to be fine, please think of that in the hereafter, because it's not going to take place in this world. That is for sure, because as I said, no person is perfect. The thing that you might regard as perfect in some individual, yes, it could be there, but he or she could be deficient then in some other area. And then what would you do? Would you continue with that journey? And then it would be an unending journey, and you'll be just skipping from one person to another. So we have to realize that we are living in an era, in a world in which it is not going to be achieved ever. You have to achieve that perfection in the hereafter. If at all you earn that hereafter, in this world, you have to work hard for that. And working hard means that circumstances will be adverse, problems will be there, hardships will be there. You have to fight them out. You have to prove equal to the challenge.
So in this question, I'm not very clear about what jolly means, but I'm wondering, would the same apply, say, if it was their male friends that they were doing this with rather than their female friends? Would that still count as
Yeah,
infidelity?
obviously. I mean, that would mean something that you find missing in your wife. If you find, I mean, if you have can have it fulfilled from your own male friend, that should not be a problem. Even in some cases, that could be even with your female relatives, or I mean, some of your friends or your colleagues. But then it has to remain in certain bounds, because this is a slippery area. Because when you get into a conversation with the opposite gender, it is bound to escalate because of the natural attraction that the spouses have, that men and women have for one another. So even if there are certain situations in which this might be unavoidable, or this could be that you're something which is possible, then you have to exercise extra care for that. Other than that, it would be much more recommended that you do so with your male friends, and women with their own friends, so that this remains in a certain area. And also, we have to understand that I mean, these are traits which each one of us has. I mean, if, for example, if the husband is jolly and the wife is not, then there could be other things in which the wife has a positive trait and the husband does not have it. So it's like a situation in which there could be one thing missing and another thing present, and one thing missing in the other person and present in the other person. So the bottom line again is to realize that we have to live with whatever you are given and make the best out of it, and wait for that perfect relationship in the hereafter.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Riaz, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Walaikum assalam.
Doctor, I think I have a comment that as a parents, we raise our sons and daughters in a different way. So maybe that is also part of it, that when the sons, they grow up, they always think that they have, I mean, the more, I mean, power and everything over the woman. So I think it starts from from how we raise our sons, and we should pay attention to it.
Correct. So yes, Vyasa, you're absolutely correct, because in most Eastern societies, boys are given preference over girls. They are given more importance. The comparison is often telling, and so therefore they feel as if they are more empowered, and they feel as if they are preferred in the society. And this has to change as well. And parents must raise their girls and boys in a very in an absolutely equal way. And yes, they could have different responsibilities, they could have different levels of achievement, but that is what they have. As far as the parents themselves are concerned, they must not differentiate in any way between the genders, give them equal affection, and in fact make amends in certain cases, because girls and women have been wronged over the last many centuries. So if they can go extra, I mean, they can do something extra for them, it might be even better.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, how does one go about providing feedback to his or her spouse? Because it's, especially for some people, that has the potential to become a landmine.
See, this is again something which I just talked about, that if we are born with this notion, if we are given this recommendation before marriage, see, these are things that we need to teach our children or our future children, I mean, future marriage partners, that before marriage, these are certain parameters that we have to learn. And because it's too late once marriage has taken place and once you start spelling out these parameters, because as I said, in most cases, people might not accept them. They can only be accepted if both the spouses make this effort and they would like that their marriage be smooth and up and running. But the ideal would be that these values, these marriage tips are given to them before marriage. So if the mother of a daughter, I mean, or the future wife, gives her these tips, that you must seek for feedback from your husband, or that you must be sincere, or that you must be truthful, then that is going to work in a much better way than when things start happening after marriage. So I think basically the best situation, or the best scenario, would be that these things are taught and inculcated much before marriage. But all is not lost if this has not been done. Even after marriage, you can talk sense into people. You can tell them this is how you would like to give them feedback. And I also gave you this advice. I think this advice goes for everyone, that at times you don't even need to ask for that feedback. You just shut your eyes and think what feedback you would get from your wife or husband. More often than not, if you are objective, if you are a little dispassionate, you'll get that feedback without even your spouse telling you, because you would feel that thing in the air. But yes, there are certain things in which we don't realize and we need someone to tell us. So you would be missing that area. So as I said, it's like a situation in which you need to manage and come forward and give these suggestions. And if it is something which is workable for both spouses, it's going to go on. Otherwise, you have to accept that, yes, I mean, you're not in a situation which is ideal, and you're in a situation in which we are only trying to become individuals in which marriage is going to be as practical as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. So there is a comment, and I think that kind of leads to a question, which says that we're living in the myth that spouses need to be friends as taught to us by Hollywood. If that were the case, there would be no place left for friends. And as it's seen sometimes, that happens as well. People get cut off from their friends after marriage. Then all the expectations are from the spouse, and no spouse in the world can live up to all the different people in our lives. How would you go on about that?
So I think that what we're talking about here is not that you give up friendship with your own previous friends. It is that you add one more friend to your list of friends. So if you have friends before your marriage has taken place, you stick to those friends as well, because every friend has his own place or her own place. But you are adding one more person to that list when you get married. And it becomes very important. I mean, as a friend, this becomes very important because the rest of the friends that you're going to meet occasionally or maybe at a certain level. But as far as your spouse is concerned, you are going to meet him or her every single day of your life. I mean, in most cases, unless someone is traveling. So friendship with the spouse means that you give him or her that confidence that you can fall back on that person. You can rely on that person. You can trust that person. You can expect that person to encourage you. You can expect that person to express appreciation for you. You can expect that person that he or she would not demean you or belittle you in front of others, would be an honest person with whom you can spend your life. So I think this is a thing, and this is a relationship that you need to add. And this kind of friendship is different from the friendship that you might have with your own friends, because with your own friends, you have grown up, you have spent a large part of your life. There are so many jokes and events that you share in the past with them because you can relate to them after spending so many years. This might not be the case with your wife. So that's a different kind of friendship. So when I talk of friendship with your wife, actually what I'm saying here is that you are basically exposing yourself to your partner in a way that your weaknesses and your strengths are known in a very comprehensive way. Your wife knows your strengths, and the husband also knows the strengths as well as the weaknesses. So to downplay those weaknesses and to encourage those strengths, and to be a person who is there for the spouse when the need comes. As I say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. So that sort of a friend is, I think, can still be made out of a spouse. But yes, there could be certain things that you can still not share with your spouse, that you can only share with your friends. So you have to be judicious. You have to be wise in the selection of information that you share with one friend and the other friend. But I don't see a mutually exclusive position here, that if you are friends with your previous friends, you just cannot add another friend in the form of your wife. The nature of that friendship could be different, but as I said, it's not mutually exclusive.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. The next participant would like some clarification. So here they say, if Allah has made men qawamin according to Surah An-Nisa, ayah 34, shouldn't that also mean that if you have the power or final authority over women, then you should sacrifice and let the woman make some decisions as a final decider? This will not only elevate your respect in your wife's heart, but at the same time, she also feels equally invested in this whole institution of marriage and not just having to go along with it because she has no choice.
So you see, there is one thing which is what we call a legal right, and another thing that you would like to win the heart of your spouse. So to win the heart of your spouse, this is a beautiful suggestion that yes, you should let go at times of your own opinion and let the opinion of your spouse or your woman prevail, in spite of the a fact that you might think that is going to be disastrous, if I may be allowed to say, even if you let her opinion prevail, if you think so, this would be an extremely recommended thing. You will be able to win the heart of your spouse, and you would create a lot of confidence and trust in her, and she would also bring. I mean, that could bring you miles closer to one another. So this is something which has to be understood on a different plane. That you, if you would like to win the heart of your spouse, which of course is something that we should aspire for, but then there is a legal right, and that legal right is that at times that you would not like to give away that right, and you think that something grave might happen if you delegate this decision making to your spouse. And yes, that legal right can be exercised, but as I said earlier on, it's not always the case that you need to exercise that right every time it happens. On many occasions, you can let go of that right and let the wife take her decision, or let her decision prevail in order to create more goodwill. But because of the fact that, as I said, there could be certain repercussions, so the Quran, I think, chose, in my humble opinion, to give this carte blanche, or this final authority, to the person who was made liable to run, I mean, to maintain the expenditure or to be the head of the family. So I think it is but natural that this right be given to the person who is managing the affairs. So had women been given this right to manage the affairs, or maybe to earn for the families, I think it would have been natural for the wife to be given this right. But because the husband has been made liable to this, so therefore the final decision has been legally given to him. But as I said, this is just a legal choice. It's not always a question of applying your legal choice or adopting that legal opinion that you automatically have. At times, it is good to let go as well. So I think this is something which could always be practiced for good mutual relationships.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, there are also some hadiths that point out that out of four things, that is wealth, beauty, caste, and religion, religion should be preferred. As we know, people often just have extrinsic orientation for religion, but not intrinsic. And that's just for showing off or keeping a persona. So how does one go on about knowing someone's religion before marriage?
Well, that is pretty easy. Religion, of course, means that a person is a practicing person, practices what he preaches or she preaches. So I think this is something which is evident, or could be made evident from the acquaintances of the would-be spouse. They have friends. These are things that you can even ask, because people generally don't lie in these habits. You can ask them whether they are what sort of people they are, or how they take religion. Do they take it seriously, or is it something that they don't practice? And people are very forthright, and they are very direct today. They'll tell you that, well, this is what they do and this is what they don't do. Yes, there are people who might even deceive you in this, but then this is something which can happen in any other matter as well. But if there's a chance that this is something that can happen, then you can always have a backup. As I said, feedback from other family and friends of that person, which would be enough to tell you what sort of practice that person is having. And of course, this is something which seldom remains hidden if you're living in a society where you are doing a job, you have gone to school, and things are, I mean, known about you. Yes, this could be a point in which you are living in a different country or a different society, but then there again, you can also consult the immediate friends of that person or people who used to know him in the past. And there are ways and means to find out these things in a very subtle way.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. So in the last few minutes, we're done with all of the on-topic questions. We have some off-topic questions. The first one asks, it's regarding revenge, and it's in terms of if somebody wants to take revenge on someone with power who has the ability to now sort of ruin that person's life. And if he accepts the order of the person in power or denies it, in both conditions, he or his family will be jeopardized. Then, in that case, is it right to harm the person in power to get the same kind of revenge? Because if that doesn't happen, then there are stages that are seen taking effect in which family members might commit suicide, or I think that's pretty much it. They might commit suicide, and justice system itself is very expensive. So in this case, who will be responsible for this act?
I think instead of pinpointedly answering this question, because as I said, it would need some more details, we should understand in principle and in practice, revenge is a right that you have, and you can take an equal amount of revenge, commensurate with the harm that you had been caused. But this is not something which is always an option. You have to exercise your common sense. You have to see the situation, whether it's going to be a productive thing, and if you think that it's going to be a counterproductive thing, then it's not that you need to go after it. So I think that in principle, you just need to understand that this is a right that you can exercise. But if you think that it's going to prove counterproductive, then you should adopt some other path. You should use your common sense, your experience, maybe even consult people. So it's not like 2 + 2 makes 4 all the time, because relationships, human interactions, they are very, very subtle, and they are at times very unpredictable, and at times they're not going to happen the way you're going to imagine, the way you generally imagine. So I think you need to exercise your own common sense, and maybe even consult someone in this regard, and just let yourselves know that yes, you have a right to revenge, equal revenge, but then exercising the right might not be the wise thing to do at a particular moment of time.
And this is in relation to having equal rights through lawful means, right?
Yeah,
instead of
right.
taking the law in your hands.
Well, yes, you just cannot take the law in your hands. But I mean, there's certain things that you cannot just attempt to do, because that is something which only the law can do. But yes, there are certain things in which you can do the same manner. For example, if someone slaps you, you can slap him back, so to speak. But if someone steals something from you, you should not start stealing or doing something which is against the law.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question is about how much freedom does one have when it comes to arts and entertainment, and does the government have any authority to impose bans? So this is in context to a movie called Joyland, and it contains elements and portrays a relationship between a married man and a transgender male. And some of children are quite influenced with the narrative that it's their freedom, and that why do we need to stay quiet about other things that are happening in the country, like rape and abuse, etc.
So I think the role of the government is something that they need to understand is regulatory. It is something which, if a proper censor board thinks that there are things in a movie or in a drama or in any other form of entertainment that is going to harm certain relationships, that they cause some damage to the purity which should be found between relationships, then in principle this is a right that they have. Because you see, when you talk about governments, when you talk about a system of justice, you talk about its authority, that whatever they think to be immoral or vulgar or not appropriate for the audience, they have the right to do so. But this is what I say in principle. Now, there could be a wrong application of these principles. People might apply them wrongly. So therefore, we have to understand that this is something that goes on in every society, that part of one society would think that there's absolutely no wrong in that, and the other part would think something else. So I think the best way out would be that if a censor board or some authority decides against a particular movie or a drama, then the reasoning that they offer is something that has to be discussed and debated, and it could be a debate on the public forum. But at the end of the day, if the law is made, then even if you don't agree with the law, then there's no way but to follow that law, while at the same time you can discuss on a public forums like the newspaper maybe, or on a TV channel, or so many other areas in which you can present your difference of opinion. So yes, difference of opinion is something that would always be discussed, but at the same time complying with the law.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Raza, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. There's an equivalence I make. There's a hadith which says that if a man and woman meet in private, the third person with them is shaitan, right? So similarly, I make the equivalence that between a husband and wife, the third person is God. So if God is not present as that intermediary, it's just two people of generally two genders, and then they are just kind of fighting it out, trying to see, who will supersede and who will kind of win out this, whatever confrontation this is. So I feel that in kind of our current day and age, it it is just becoming more and more about these two people, and they are just it becoming more and more confrontational in that sense, and God is kind of missing from that picture.
So, right, that is also a situation in which, because the relationship is not based on God consciousness, that it does cause that drift to increase. But besides that God consciousness, you see, even if you have that God consciousness, there are certain traits that you need to develop. I mean, being aware of God, being respectable to God is one thing, and then moving ahead in that direction and developing certain traits, like, as I said, that forbearance, that friendship, that fidelity, that forgiveness element, or some of the other elements like being truthful to one another. So these are things that you can build upon. But yes, the starting point is that you have to have some commonality, some starting point. So what I was referring to are certain things that are to be built upon that initial fear of God, and the fact that yes, you are members, you're Muslims, and you're talking about individuals who already believe in God, but somehow God is not figuring in their relationship, and so that is something which is, of course, a given, that being a person who is always oriented towards God, who has this eye for the hereafter, who has God in his own self as a living ideal for his own self. And as you rightly said, that these are the things that we need to also work upon, and that is why you see, if you look at those marriage sermons, you'll find the verses that are being read in those sermons. It's all of them, three of them are read out, and all of them says, "Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ittaqullah." Oh, people who believe, fear God, be conscious of Him. So that is precisely why the element of God is referred to in that nikah khutbah, that fear God, because He's present among you. He's a person that you're going to face one day. So all your dealings with one another have to be based on justice and fairness.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I was wondering, so I read a blog about a Muslim woman who married a Christian man, and she said that they have very similar values and high religious compatibility in that sense. So in this case, because according to the Quran, only a man gets to make the decision to marry Ahlul Kitab women and not vice versa. What would you say about this if you have a lot of religious compatibility, but now you're marrying someone from a different religion that isn't halal for you, per se? Or is my understanding wrong?
Yeah, I think I have discussed this elsewhere in some of my Quran series, that this is a gross misunderstanding, that even women from the people of the book, they are not given, I mean, men have not been given them that open and that absolute permission to marry them. That too are under certain conditions, and that is when this permission was given in the Quran. This was a time in which Arabia was actually conquered by, I mean, it was, religion had prevailed in Arabia, and the Jews and Christians both were subservient to that religion. They were subservient to the traditions and culture of Islam. And if while living in this culture, if a woman from the people of the book married a Muslim, then she, in all probability, would remain, I mean, she would be dominated by those traditions and even might end up converting to Islam. So it's like living in against a dominant force. So likewise, this is something which is only recommended in areas in which Islam is the dominant force. It would not be recommended, for example, in countries like the United States or UK or other areas in which, I mean, religion is not even there as a dominant force. When I talk about religion, of course, I refer to Islam. So the context of that verse means that you are recommended to marry among Muslims, because you see, those 100% values of monotheism are only shared between two Muslims. So a step down was taken, that yes, you can marry from the people of the book as well, but then only in those circumstances when religion is reigning supreme and its traditions are reigning supreme. And then too, just the women, because being the heads of the family, men still have that ability to exercise a lot of authority in certain areas. But yes, when a woman starts to marry outside that, and she marries a man, for example, from the people of the book, then this would no longer be the case. But even before this happens, as I said, even for the lady from the people of the book, I mean, this marriage is recommended by the Quran only when in a society, in a country, in a culture, Islam is already reigning supreme and the traditions of Islam are acceptable to all, so that when a Christian woman enters the household of a Muslim man, she knows that she's living in subservience to those traditions.
So then in this case, Dr. Saleem, we have a lot of people that say that they're Muslim outwardly, but they don't do anything that Muslims are supposed to do in terms of practicing religion. In that case, does that also make them haram in a sense?
No, it doesn't make this marriage haram, because you see, they are not doing a lot of other things by asking religion. So if they do this thing, the marriage would not be called invalid in any way. But yes, it would be something which is against the dictates of religion. So, I mean, it's like a person who is a Muslim by birth, but he's not maybe offering the prayer. You will still call him a Muslim. What you'll say, he's a non-practicing Muslim. So similarly, if a person enters into such a marriage, the marriage would still be valid, although you would say that it has one of the basic areas that it should have satisfied or met those conditions have not been met. So it's like something in which you are not giving due importance to religion. So if you're not giving that due importance, then the question will not arise automatically that you should ask religion to have a say in your marital affairs.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the questions today. Any concluding remarks?
So inshallah, we'll be having this once a month lecture series every month. So the pattern that I have thought of is that we'll have we start every month with the ask session, then we'll have a study circle, then we have a lecture session, and then we'll come to the study circle again. So like 4 weeks, we'll have 2 programs of study circle, 1 ask session and 1 lecture session, so that there is some variety. So see you next week, inshallah, in the Islam study circle.